It's time to explore the world according to Glenn. I'm Kevin Jacobsen. Glenn Close is my favorite actress, and this show is all about exploring the career of one of the finest actors of her generation. Each episode, I'll be joined by a guest as we dive into one of Glenn's movies, TV shows, or stage productions, going chronologically through her career, discussing her performance, and assessing the project itself. And today, we're talking Glenn's heartfelt voice performance as a mother gorilla in Disney's Tarzan.
Eight-time nominee Glenn Close, motherfuckers.
My guest today is a film critic and co-host of the podcast, Oscar Wilde. He's a contributor at Awards Watch, and he joined me for the wonderfully chaotic 2009 Best Actress episode of And the Runner-Up Is. So excited. Welcome to the show, Nick Ruhrkraut.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm so excited to talk about this movie with you. I think we could go in a lot of different directions with this that don't even have to do with Glenn, but I'm excited for wherever this road takes us.
Exactly.
Well, before we talk Glenn in Tarzan, tell me your relationship to Glenn Close overall, and if you remember when you first saw her and what you like about her, and if you have a favorite performance from her.
I think like many, and I know this has been an answer before, but I think the first time I was aware of Glenn, I'm pretty sure that I had seen Glenn before I was aware of her, but this was in 101 Dalmatians, obviously. I may have seen Hook before this, but I don't think I was aware of her being in that until like recent years.
Yeah.
So as a child, I think this was my big, like, this is Glenn Close doing Cruella de Vil moment. And I think that personification of like her as an actress and what character she chose kind of came from this. So that still sticks in my mind as one of her great performances and moments on screen, but she has so many others too. And I think that's why I've liked her over the years. You know, she's not someone that's trying to steal the spotlight. She kind of lives in herself and does what she wants and stays true to that. And I think with all of the A-listers or just stars in general that we've had, I think is so rare to find in someone. So I think, you know, over the years, she's been so consistent too, in that, you know, when she comes back, whether it's for Four Good Days or Hillbilly Elegy or Wake Up Dead Man, she's always a sight to see. And I say that jokingly, but you know, it is fun to see her come back time and time again.
I love that. And do you still feel like, though, that Cruella is your number one from her?
I know. I was trying to think of a number one. And I think that's why it's so hard, is because she's given us so many different personalities. She gives us this evil side to her. We see that a bit in Dangerous Liaisons or Fatal Attraction, but we also get the softer side. And one of my favorite movies of hers, The Big Chill, and just such a different kind of performance. So it's so hard. I mean, I think with favorites, I'll say 101 Dalmatians, and maybe like slightly followed up by The Big Chill. We'll land on that for right now.
I mean, that is like two diametrically opposed performances and films. And that just speaks to her versatility.
Exactly.
You know?
Yep.
She refuses to be typecast. And I think we love that about her. Even though if lately it's become a little more of like the kooky, sort of over the top flavor of Glenn as of late. But you know, she's still capable of that softness. So
of course, I think we're still waiting for her Sunset Boulevard to happen, and I'm hoping she can showcase a little bit of all of that in that performance.
Yes, that sure would be nice. That would be a dream. And I hope it becomes a reality, but still waiting. The years just keep going by. But anyway, not to get too off on that tangent, let's jump right into Tarzan. So this is Glenn's final feature film of the 90s. She is returning to the world of Disney, having already been, of course, in the Disney family with 101 Dalmatians. She's often talked about how some of her earliest memories were watching Disney movies like Snow White and Bambi. She mentioned in her Golden Globe speech, even for The Wife, seeing those early Disney films and like Haley Mills in The Parent Trap, and felt inspired because of them. So she's always had a soft spot for Disney. And while she, of course, goes to play an iconic Disney villain in 101 Dalmatians, here she gets to do the opposite of that, which is to play a very maternal, kind figure. So Disney approached her directly for the role. Also worth noting, this is her first voice performance on film since Gandahar in 1988, a movie that very few people have seen other than me and probably a dozen people who are following along with this show. But yeah, it's a little more memorable, this one. She said in an interview in 1999 that she was partially inspired to do the film because of her daughter, Annie Stark, who, of course, went on to play a younger version of her in The Wife, and getting the chance to not only play a sort of role model figure for her, like a mother role model figure, but also to have a film that her younger daughter could see, with Annie being only 11 years old at the time. And another part of this is she very kind of keenly observed that she's quoted as saying, "This is only the second mother figure that exists through the whole movie in the big animated Disney movies." And she says, "What is so rare and beautiful about this story is that the mother exists and she is allowed to be strong and nurturing, and the story still happens." So I think what she's referring to there is the first one being The Lion King, with Sarabi kind of surviving through that whole story. Although Mulan also has her mother still alive at the end, but that was kind of happening concurrently with Tarzan. So I'm guessing she was just only counting The Lion King, but it is rather alarming to look at that as a trend of mother figures very rarely surviving Disney movies. So Tarzan is the first feature-length animated adaptation of Tarzan and the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs, after having a long legacy, of course, of live-action film adaptations dating back to the silent era. And there had been many, many in the subsequent decades up until 1999. So this story begins with Tarzan as a baby with his parents, who come from Britain on an expedition that leaves them shipwrecked in equatorial Africa. They build a treehouse to live in, but Tarzan's parents are killed by Sabor, a vicious leopard. Meanwhile, Kala, voiced by Glenn, is a gorilla mated to Kerchak, the leader of his gorilla troop, or whatever you call them, and their son is killed by Sabor as well, but Kala happens to find baby Tarzan abandoned in this treehouse and decides to adopt him and raise him as her own. So Tarzan grows up with the gorillas and other animals of the jungle, including his friend Turk, a gorilla, and Tantor, an elephant. And as he gets older, he begins to struggle with his identity until the arrival of Professor Archimedes Q. Porter and his charming daughter Jane, and a hunter named Clayton, who are on an expedition to study the gorillas. And Tarzan meets Jane, and the two begin to fall in love as she teaches him the human world. But their harmony is disrupted when Clayton tries to hunt down the gorillas and sell them for profit. And Tarzan is forced to step in and protect his family. So that's our little summary there. I also didn't mention some of the other great cast members here, including the voices of Tony Goldwyn as adult Tarzan, Minnie Driver as Jane, Rosie O'Donnell as Turk, Brian Blessed as Clayton, Lance Henriksen as Kerchak, Wayne Knight as Tantor, and Nigel Hawthorne as Professor Porter. So yeah, quite a stacked cast. Nick, thoughts on Tarzan? Curious what kind of relationship you might have had with this movie growing up, what you think of it now, and what you think of Glenn's voice work here.
Tarzan was definitely a movie I grew up with. I'm certain I still have the VHS back home, the thick cover, the white plastic. And I don't know if it was ever a favorite of mine, but it definitely stands as like one of those classic Disney movies. I think this is near the end of that Renaissance era of sorts that
it is the end, actually.
Yeah, maybe as millennials are so fond of. And it's also one that when you look at the animation styles, almost as like the end of the hand-drawn animation. And I like how it uses a mix of that and the computer generated animation. It gives it a different quality, maybe like Atlantis did, I feel like a
Mm-hmm.
bit, but
Yeah.
I think Tarzan is a movie. I liked it back then. I still like it now. It's not one of my favorites, but I think, the relationships there are very dear to, the characters or what Disney had been trying to do for so long. It didn't feel manipulative, and, I'm glad they haven't remade this yet.
Yet.
I think, one that it was made at a similar time is the Brendan Fraser George of the Jungle. So,
Mm.
the turn of the century sort of films that stick with your mind at that age. But I wasn't even aware that Glenn was a voice in this until very recently. Some of those other characters, like you mentioned, Rosie
Yeah.
O'Donnell really sticking out as Turk, that I
Mm-hmm.
was aware of. But some of these other actors, it's interesting because I think animation or voice work has transitioned into like who are the biggest stars that we can get for these roles. And I don't say that to mean that Glenn wasn't at the time. I think she was, with 101 Dalmatians. I think that's sort of an easy follow-up for Disney to come back to also as
Mm-hmm.
this motherly role. But it makes it an interesting addition for Disney. And I think where they took it, but it has all of those classic moments of, fun montage and heartwarming moments with Kala and Tarzan, or kind of dark moments, when their child, who I think I saw voiced by Lily Collins, which is
Yes.
the connection there, obviously, to Phil Collins and the
Mm-hmm.
wonderful
Right.
soundtrack and
Still hits.
Oscar-winning song, yes.
Yep.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but all of those moments, it creates this nice dynamic in this movie where, you look back and say, oh, this is for the entire family. And I think as a kid, you don't find those moments too dark. So I like this movie. I think with Glenn, it's not one of her big roles. She only has a few lines throughout the movie, but I think what she does is so endearing. And I think I also read, maybe you can correct me if this is wrong, but she was one of the only ones to do her own singing in the movie, or
Mm-hmm.
she's the only one
Yeah.
who has those singing moments. So I think that's another way to make her shine and add
Mm-hmm.
emotion where they don't have these like overly emotional moments. It's her singing to Tarzan very softly, or at the very end, she's like, I need to show you where this all began. And,
Yeah.
that is the heart of the movie of Tarzan, of who the character becomes. And I think that's why this movie is notable now, looking back at Glenn, what
Mm-hmm.
she's done, and why it still sticks around today. It's more than just the Tarzan and Jane of it all, or Clayton and how evil he is, but I think it's a nice collection of things that Disney thankfully did very well.
Yeah. I would say Kala is the heart and soul of Tarzan.
Hmm.
How about that? I think more people should be talking about that. Maybe we'll dig into that a little more. But yeah, for me, Tarzan personally is when I started to slightly drift away from the Disney animated films. It was obviously the end of the Renaissance, as you said. I think some people felt like at the time this was a bit of a step down from those highs of those like early 90s, like Beauty and the
Hmm.
Beast and Lion King, even Pocahontas and Hunchback. Like there was an element of prestige there that I think slightly dissipated when we got to like Hercules, and it was there a little bit with like Mulan again, but with Tarzan, I think it was kind of like we were sort of getting like the B sides of the highs of before, I guess, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
I definitely saw Tarzan quite a bit as a kid, but I can't say it was specifically like a Glenn Close thing. I don't even remember it being advertised as like her being in it very much,
No.
kind of like you're
Yeah.
saying. But yeah, still remember really liking it, especially the visuals and Tarzan sort of surfing through the trees,
Yeah.
and the greenery of the jungle is so vivid, and the blending of 2D and 3D, like you mentioned, I think is really striking. And as an adaptation of the Tarzan story, I do find it really effective, especially in the first two acts, as the film is kind of delving into his internal struggle and finding that sense of belonging in this world where no one looks like him. And then once someone arrives who does, there's like this great spark of curiosity in him to learn all about it and really grapple with what he wants to do and go on from there. And so I think that's really compelling. I also think the voice performances are really pretty great all around, very lived in, which you don't often get with like these celebrity-ish voice casts, especially nowadays. I think Tony Goldwyn really nails that sort of primal, animalistic kind of like masculine tone of voice that works really well for Tarzan. And Minnie Driver, just coming off her Oscar nomination for Good Will Hunting, I think is really charming, kind of like a clumsy British Bridget Jones kind of vibe she's giving here. Rosie O'Donnell and Wayne Knight, I mean, you talk about 90s cinema, like Rosie and Wayne, they were like the go-to voices, especially for these kinds of films. And then with Glenn, I think it's kind of just this nice, quietly moving performance she's giving, where she is so warm and there's this resonance in her voice that is very reassuring, the way she's able to kind of talk Tarzan off the ledge in a manner of speaking whenever he's feeling down. It's just very sweet and such a sharp contrast from Cruella that a lot of people, again, probably didn't even know that this was her, even as they were watching it, because I don't think she even really has that super distinct Glenn voice. I think she might be doing a little bit of a slightly different kind of voice. It's kind of hard to explain. It doesn't sound exactly like her at times.
I mean, I agree. I think that's why I never realized it was her. And I mean, even to an extent, like Tony Goldwyn or other actors that I don't define by their voice. I mean, Minnie Driver, I really heard on rewatch this time. But yeah, it's Wayne Knight and Rosie O'Donnell, kind of like you said, playing a B-side to Timon and Pumbaa.
Yes, very much so.
And they have the moments that are like the funniest or the wackiest, like when they're tearing up the camp and playing that song. Like that's a moment that sticks out in this movie. It's not necessarily Kala coddling of sorts Tarzan at times. And Glenn, yeah, she really does have that like soft touch in her voice. She's never brash, she's never loud, you know, that we've seen from Glenn on TV or in film. So I think that's why it's hard to distinguish. Again, it's not a bad thing. It's just that was I think, a good choice by her. You know, you had mentioned Gandahar, which I have not seen, but
well,
the fact
you and everyone else in the world.
yeah. You know, I heard her in an interview talking about her work and how difficult it was, but I don't necessarily think it was hard for her to find this character because she's so loving. And even though it was different for her, but I think I don't know, it's not a character that should be screaming like front and center either. So I get it. You know, we always do want more of Glenn, but I think she manages who the character is really well.
I think we could have gotten a little more of that side of Glenn if there were more scenes with her and Kerchak.
Yeah.
And just kind of having them squabbling because they have very different parenting styles, clearly. So that could have been interesting, but it's obviously not her story, so I get it. But just to go through the film somewhat sequentially, I do want to start with just the opening sequence, which I think is really stunning. I was surprised watching it back how effective it is at just establishing everything from, like, we get the shots of Kala and Kerchak with their son and living in harmony, relatively speaking, and interspersed with Tarzan and his parents getting shipwrecked and then adapting. I just think it's a really striking opening, and it's told completely without words. Like, all we hear is Phil Collins going ham with two worlds, you know, and just giving all this expository through song, you know, setup. And I think it's also just a nice demonstration of how Kala is ultimately kind of key to the story, the way she finds this baby in the wreckage, a human who I think she's kind of been taught to fear, you know, but she's looking beyond prejudice and seeing a child who needs a mother. And for her, she's also a mother who needs a child because their child has died.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both suffering these great losses. And even though them becoming family won't make up for the losses per se all the way, it comes pretty close to filling those, you know, those holes in their hearts, I guess, and speaking to the greater story being told about family and home
Mm-hmm.
and identity. So suffice to say, I do think this is a really great establishing opening. Maybe it's not the circle of life per se, but like, I was like, damn, like we're telling a lot just through visual language here without even needing to explain things.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think this is one of the strongest Disney introductions. It's incredible exposition, and right off the bat, there's a shot, a match cut of the human family to the gorilla family. And like that's all you need to see to understand like what the movie's about or what these relationships mean to one another. And I love like a silent intro and the
Mm-hmm.
song being played over also. I think this is nearly a perfect soundtrack. But how much we get to see, exactly what you said. And by
Mm-hmm.
the end, we understand everything, the loss that Kala feels, the struggle that they have in parenting styles, who Tarzan is, and kind of where we go from here. I love that we see Kala hearing Tarzan's crying, and then later in the movie, when Turk and Tantor hear Tarzan scream from one of the lost scenes. It's a nice
Yep.
parallel that, we're echoing back to family and what that means
Mm-hmm.
to all of these characters. So, yeah, I am so struck by this introduction. And not to say that it falls off either. I think it's just a different movie, but I love like what it can do with its visual language so
Mm-hmm.
simply without any words and not like a voiceover either.
Yeah. Speaking about it now, it does make me wonder what a different version of this would look like if we didn't have dialogue between him and the animals per se, and we only finally got that dialogue once the humans arrived.
Yeah.
Would have been very interesting. I'm just thinking of like what they did with Flo this past year with just like, no
Mm-hmm.
dialogue at all with those animals. Could have been very striking. I know that that's very much not what Disney was doing at that time, but you know,
Right.
just got me thinking. But the way she even just establishes with Kerchak right away, being like, "Well, I'm gonna be his mother now, Kerchak. Like, I saved him from this
Mm-hmm.
leopard," and it's like, it won't replace their son, but he still needs her, and she, in a way, kind of needs him to help her get over her grief to a certain extent. But also, just these are her maternal instincts, and
Mm-hmm.
I just love how sort of quietly radical this is in a way, because even though it's not called attention to within like the text of the story through dialogue or whatever, the sense of her making this decision to adopt this boy on her own without even getting Kerchak's permission, that kind of strong mama bear energy, I think is very powerful. And how very rarely we see her kind of deferring to him. I think there's just this sort of quiet strength there that is definitely not called attention to in the film itself, but just, kind of on close observation of just looking at the Kala character through this sort of exercise. I think you can sort of see the care that is put into this character and how very rarely you see this kind of maternal figure in Disney movies at all for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason.
Yeah. I think her choices in the introduction cue you into noticing what she does in the rest of the movie. Like, I think this is the big act of adopting Tarzan, but then you start to notice when she does stand up to Kerchak or later on when she agrees with Kerchak and Tarzan is older and she's saying, well, maybe you need to listen to him also and in trying to teach Tarzan a lesson as he's growing up. So I like how it's not one note and she makes her own decisions and it's for the best of their colony or Tarzan, but it's for the best of the group and them living through this. And even though Tarzan makes mistakes, she's always there for him in the end.
Yeah, it's really sweet. It really is. And I just think what she does with her voice, it speaks to her, of course, being a parent herself with a young child at the time. But it really, like, it's so natural to her. And of course, that is so clear in the You'll Be in My Heart performance, where
Mhm.
she just sounds so wonderful. There's just a resonance in her voice that evokes something that is very deeply maternal. The warmth, it's like a nice warm blanket hearing her sing.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that as a stan. I do think that effect does translate to the audience, right? You know?
Yeah.
And it will not surprise you to learn that I do prefer this version to the pop version that we hear in the credits that played on the radio at the time. But still, sure, it's very on the nose. Just that first verse, her being like, "Come stop your crying, it will be all right. Come take my hand, hold it tight. I will protect you from all around you. I will be here, don't you cry." It's kind of like the same thought repeated 4 times, but in that respect, I actually think it really works as like a lullaby that a mother would sing to her
Yeah.
infant son, to let him know she'll always be there for him no matter what dangers may come or what questions he might have about his identity or his family, that she won't judge him at all. All of which I
Totally.
think makes her a great Disney mother who rarely gets talked about in that way.
Yeah, totally. Did she sing at the Oscars? Do you know? Was she, I wonder if
No,
she was even like approached to help sing. Because that would have
she
been
did not.
obviously an
Would have been
incredible
lovely.
moment. Too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because she is, I mean, a part of the song. There is the version that you can listen to with her in it. And, for her being the only one really to sing out of the cast, again, just puts another microscope on her character in terms of what
Mhm.
that means to the story. And yes,
Mhm.
maybe the lyrics are easy, but again, I think that's for its audience too, so that it
Yeah.
can enjoy the music, understand it, and see what connections are more important in this. It's not
Mhm.
Kerchak singing and having that hardened kind of look at life. It's Kala who can see all of the dynamics happening at once and really getting across. And I think some of the best movies that we have, not Disney, not just Disney, of course, but really showcase how hard it is to be a mother. I think we have that a lot this year as we
Yeah,
talk.
that's true.
The battle, one battle after another of motherhood. So I think maybe Disney was a little ahead of its time in that sense of, showcasing that and being brave enough to do that.
Yes. Also, you saying all that did make me think of 2 questions. I have 2 follow-up questions.
Hmm.
One of which is, what do you actually think of the song You'll Be in My Heart? Because this is apparently a very divisive song that a lot of people seem to find kind of cheesy, or like the fact that it won an Oscar over some songs that people thought were better really grinds people's gears. But there's others who are like, this is one of the most important songs of my life. So, like, where do you fall on that scale?
I like the song. I have no qualms with the song or any of
Okay.
these songs. I love like the Son of Man montage later on, but I think
Oh,
this
yeah.
being the song of the movie is totally fine. I
Yeah.
think people need to maybe relax if they have
Yes.
such an issue. I mean, maybe if
Hmm.
we look at a list of best original songs of the year or something, we
Sure.
can find some arguments. But I think when on Oscar Wilde we did like a Disney Oscars, and I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure I chose this song as my like favorite song. So
Wow.
I
Okay.
think it's one that sticks with you. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
there are plenty of original Disney songs that do, but I think this song is an easy way to think of this movie too, as like a summation
Yeah.
of the soundtrack and what the movie means overall.
Yeah. I just think yes, it's cheesy in its own way, but I just think it's perfectly fitting with what the story is being told. So in that
Hmm.
way, I think it's a very good original song winner. Maybe I do prefer a few more in that lineup, but I don't know why people have such an issue with this. Like
Right.
it's okay. It's just it's for a children's movie. Like it's
Yeah.
okay. Um, Okay, random follow-up question. We don't have to spend too much time on this, but because you brought up the motherhood angle of this past year, I'm
Uh-huh.
curious which of the characters of 2025 from Best Actress contenders would you most like to see sing "You'll Be in My Heart" to their child?
Um, I mean, I think it has to be Teyana Taylor singing
Oh,
to Chase.
yeah, I like that.
One because it's so off the wall, but two because Teyana is also a singer.
Well, Jessie Buckley can sing too. She did Wild Rose,
Oh
you know.
yes, obviously
Yeah.
her. I mean, honestly, any of them for funny or serious reasons. Jennifer Lawrence singing in "Die My
Mhm.
Love" would be so bizarre.
Yes.
I don't think
Rose
we have
Byrne.
any
Yeesh.
wrong answers. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Rose Byrne. Imagine her singing a lullaby in "If I Had Legs,"
Yes. To an off-screen child.
going out of her mind. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Um, who would yours be? Do you have a an answer?
Rose Byrne for the irony of it all.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
I just think it would be funny to, like you said, kind of in her mania, sort of just like trying to kind of like trying to convince herself that like motherhood is what I wanted. Like it's okay. I can do this. You'll
Hmm.
be in my heart. Yeah. I don't know.
We zoom
Just
into
something I'm thinking
the
about.
black hole of the ceiling, and it's just her singing to her
Yes.
child.
See,
It could
free
happen.
ideas. Yes.
Great. Deleted
Yes.
scenes.
Would not have been surprised considering all the shit that happens in that movie if that had happened too.
Right?
But anyway, yes.
Great question. I like that.
Yeah. I also just like for Kala though that she is very supportive of him like coming up with his own sound. She also the way she kind of is contrasting very starkly with Kerchak and his more conditional love and how it takes him a long time to really accept Tarzan as his son because of those differences that he can't help.
Hmm.
It's like even with how he gets in trouble as a kid with the whole thing where his animal friends dare him to steal like an elephant's hair and it turns into a disaster. When he comes back and Kerchak is kind of getting hard on him and Kala pushes back and is sort of pleading with him that like you never give him a chance, that he basically needs to like lay off him and let him make mistakes, that it's part of growing up. So yeah, I think all of that really works even as like an allegory too of families that are maybe less traditional, like adopted families or parents with kids who are expressing themselves differently, you know, queer kids, even trans kids. Like there's like that great scene where Tarzan looks at his own reflection in the water and paints himself with mud to look like a gorilla and asks like why he's so different, and she's assuring him that like don't pay attention to what Kerchak said, and says like, you know, we both got two eyes, a nose, two ears, and
Yeah.
you know, two hands, and helps him think about not what he sees but what he feels. So I think all of that is
Hmm.
very resonant to me, and it's nice that she is so accepting. Like I said it in my letterbox review, but I would come out to her. I think she would be so lovely and give me a big hug and I could exhale.
Yeah, you do feel that. Yeah, I liked your review of that. And I didn't look at that scene as, with that connection, but I totally feel that because you see
Mm,
him covering his face with mud and, her swatting it away.
mm,
And I think that is just a deeply felt scene in the movie of him realizing that being different is okay. With that scene and Tarzan doing wrong in a sense, they do show Kala where it's like she feels a little embarrassed because she has kind of been the one to blame in a sense for Tarzan's mistakes for taking this on because she was the
yeah.
one who adopted him. But I think her power in pushing back, in letting Tarzan kind of live and have a childhood, there's also power in that. So it's
Mm,
showing the difficulties of being a parent and motherhood and realizing that, children are going to make mistakes, but eventually they do learn to be their own person and to take responsibility. And I think
yeah.
they do show Tarzan doing that once he grows up. And I like when she says, like, to make his own sound, not one
Yeah.
like an elephant or, something that he can really be proud of. I think that's all entangled in can come back to this moment too that they share. I love
Mm.
like the handprint and
Mhm.
the hand on the heart. Yeah, you'll always be in my heart. I think,
Mhm.
cheesy but effective again.
Exactly. Yes. So then with the Son of Man growing up sequence, I find that so stunningly animated too. The way he runs and slides through like the vines and the tree limbs and that
Hmm.
blending of CGI and traditional animation. It's so visually arresting. And
Yeah.
you're seeing how he's become such an expert in this environment, like a true sort of king of the jungle, like just going on muscle memory basically. And then that abrupt stop at the end where he turns his head to look at the camera. So fierce. Love that.
Yeah.
Loved it as a kid. Still love it now. And you know what else I appreciate? And this is probably going to sound odd considering this is ostensibly a children's movie, but I swear there's a greater point to this. I appreciate that they make him hot. Like, Tarzan is a good looking man, and I think we need to say it. And the reason I bring this up is why I think it's weirdly important, this part of it, is like it does become a love story in the second half with him and Jane. And the way they draw him, it's very realistic. The muscles and the abs and the sort of soulful expressions and that primal quality to him, and like her desire to teach him. Like, there are all these things
Hmm.
that Jane, I think, is really obviously struck by. And I appreciate that even though this is for families, like I'm saying, there is like a sensuality to this at the same time that is largely missing from most of their other animated films, and you can sort of feel their chemistry as they go on.
Yeah. I mean, Tarzan could be one of those roles or in a letterbox review jokingly of like, oh, this is when I realized I was gay or something like that.
Yeah.
um,
And many people have said George of the Jungle, Brendan Fraser
yeah.
around that same time, like you said. So
Yeah.
there's something in the air.
Yeah. And I mean, that is Tarzan. That is the character.
Sure.
You can say, you're glad that you can be glad that they didn't change the character so much because it was Disney or make him into something else that he wasn't known to be. And yeah, Tarzan and Jane, that's a sequel that they make,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
That Disney does. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it does come back to, again, I think that's part of why Glenn is in the background is because it's Tarzan and Jane. That's the story. And as we transition into him being older, that's kind of the second half is we have these female centered roles of the mother and then transitioning into either Jane becoming a mother or at least his love interest in that half and the connection that they have together. It's
Mm.
funny, mentioning his physique because we never see him eating. I don't think like in
Mm.
The
Yeah.
Lion King, they would eat bugs and whatnot. And we see him feeding his friends
Mm.
with the bugs. But that's kind of what I always came back to is like, how are they going to survive on this island or in Africa for years and
Yeah.
years? Because he's different than those gorillas, the his
Hmm.
diet and etc. But I think because he's flying between vines and trees, that's why he looks the way he does.
Yes. Also, what is his dental hygiene?
It can be great.
Yeah.
Oh, see
Now that we're thinking
the
about it,
things
yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think as it goes on, I think Glenn, her role obviously dissipates because it becomes more of the Jane and Tarzan story, but
Hmm.
she does get her moments. She very humorously says at one point, "Don't even think about it. I'm your mother. I know everything." And I feel like she's sort of modulating her voice a little bit there. I don't know if you picked up on this, but it sounds a little bit like more like Glenn to
Hmm.
me once she gets older. I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe I'm just imagining things, but like she sounds a little more tired and has a little less of that kind of like resonant warmth, and it's a little bit like, I don't know. It just seems older, which I think is
Hmm.
a very smart, subtle choice that I can't say I paid too much attention to on previous watches, but really works to show how she's become a little more weary and even more cautious, I think, with age, because after a certain point, she even is instructing Tarzan not to really trust the humans, which I don't know how much she would have said that earlier on in her
Mm-hmm.
life, but she has gotten so used to it just being Tarzan is the only human. So there's something interesting going on in the background within this story with Kala, I think, that we don't see, but
Yeah.
is still a well-rounded character in a
Yeah,
way.
I agree. And not, I keep thinking about one battle after another, that time jump. And I think
Yeah,
because humans hadn't been around, or, in that film, that they were secluded for so long and no one had been seeking them out, that they got used to there being no other humans, or that, when she initially finds them and Kerchak is like, "Are you sure there was nobody else?" And she's like, "He was the only one." Like that was so important
right.
to them.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of that is that Annie had grown up her own daughter. And I think her being able to kind of show in her performance how motherhood changed for her when she
Mm.
was a baby versus almost a teenager, in again teaching her daughter, or Tarzan in this case, responsibility. And when humans do show up, that was the initial worry, and that he has no memory of them ever being around. So I think it just created a different dynamic for them, and he didn't understand that their safety was at risk because they were family to him. And
Mm.
it's, yeah, thinking of colonization of the Brits, and them coming in, and there's a lot of things that you don't think of as a kid either when you're seeing this. And humans being bad is kind of the one message that comes with Clayton.
Yeah.
And when they're on the boat, and so it does, I think, create some interesting plot dynamics and themes that are a little bit more complex than just things that we have seen so far in the movie.
Yeah, I think so. And balancing well with things that kids can enjoy, just the
Right.
surface level kind of stuff, with obviously Turk and Tantor being the leads of that,
Mm-hmm.
but also these adult themes like colonization, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking to that, actually, that element of it, really enjoy the Clayton creation, like the way this sort of debonair, urbane sort of tone in his voice is so rich. I love that his character is designed after Clark Gable, for a nice old Hollywood reference. I can certainly see that with the mustache.
Mm-hmm.
Love the way he says gorilla. I think that's just a lovely touch. Brian Blessed, excellent voice performance.
It's kind of giving Gaston in like
Yes,
the
very that.
bravasti and the silently evil quality, or that you see him and he just doesn't look like someone you want to trust.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's a selfishness there, but I think there's also a quality of women want to be around him, or I know there aren't really in this case, but there's an attractiveness to that. You like kind
Right.
of want to find out more about him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. An underrated villain, I would say, of this era, who isn't really talked about as much. But
Hmm.
yeah, and the way also that Tarzan and Jane meet. I should say not mate. Excuse me. Wow. That's the sequel.
Not yet.
Anyway, he has this nice little meet cute where he saves her from the baboons. I guess that's what they are,
Hmm.
and that sort of like primal physicality, the way he looks at her with such curiosity and no self-consciousness, and kind of touching her, and she's alarmed at first, but I think is soon recognizing that he is like a gentle soul, I guess, in a way.
Hmm.
That there's something very compelling about their intimacy, I think, in that first scene that is really key to Jane's arc, to making it believable that she would want to stay in the jungle at the end of the film. But I think more than that, it's tapping into Jane's curiosity and her desire to explore this more primitive world with a person that looks like her, but also away from like the confines of Britain, which,
Hmm.
this isn't Jane's story either, but I think there are hints of that, I think, that I can pick up on as an adult more so than I did as a kid, of seeing what this attraction is for her to be here.
Yeah. And I think part of that is in finding the best pieces of Kala in Jane and that
Yeah.
transition that I mentioned, but also
Mm.
when you think of either Jane or Tarzan and Jane going to Britain and living there, you think, how is Tarzan going to assimilate? How is he going to live there? And there's just no way. So I think in the ways that you think about that too, it's finding a sense that there's no other way than to stay. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there are critics out there, feminist critics out there that, don't think that Jane should have stayed, but I think there's a level of being reasonable in their staying and forming a life in terms of Disney's view of or where they take this story specifically.
Yeah, I think probably if this were remade with live action or if they were doing this today as an animated film, we would probably be getting a lot more from Jane's perspective, I would
Hmm.
guess,
Yeah.
of why she is making these choices and what makes this choice make sense and balancing it out with like this is something she actively wants and maybe she is like trying to break free from the confines of like what her father wants or whatever, even though he seems like perfectly
Hmm.
harmless in this story at least. But I'm sure they would have found a different angle than what we get here,
Yeah. I
for
mean,
better or for worse, you know?
right. And obviously it's romanticized, and maybe they do touch
Yes,
on that
very.
in Tarzan 2 or Tarzan and Jane, but inevitably, yes, it's Tarzan's story. I think that would
Yeah.
be an interesting kind of viewpoint to see this from Jane, maybe not by Disney, from
Yeah.
someone else.
Well,
But
luckily there are like dozens of other adaptations that I'm sure you could find one that has more of
right,
Jane.
right. So again, I think of what they could have done. They chose an angle that was
Yeah.
easiest for most people to identify with or understand.
Yeah. And I would imagine also there was a little bit of desire at this time to make fewer like princess Disney movies like
Hmm.
they had been doing, and there was some feeling of like having to balance out the genders a little bit with protagonists and whatnot. So I could see them wanting to slightly dampen Jane's story slightly. Not
Yeah,
that I'm saying that's a good thing, but probably
right.
from a business decision that makes sense.
Hmm.
So anyway, yes, he introduces her, Jane, to Kala, but the way Kala kind of is like interpreting this is like backing away very slowly, very cautious of getting close. And she agrees with Kerchak at this point that they cannot be trusted. And we see Tarzan like restraining Kerchak after a certain point from attacking the humans, which angers Kerchak to the point of more or less disowning him. Like there's a fascinating story going on here that, again, for me, has a little bit of a parallel to like what I was talking about with adopted families or queer kids and the idea of the father being so strict and disowning their kid for something that ultimately is okay to a certain extent, other than Clayton. Obviously he is not okay, but yeah, I just find that particular subplot to be interesting to watch. And it leads to Kala finally showing Tarzan the treehouse where his parents died. She tells him she should have shown it to him a long time ago. And I think there's some
Hmm.
real guilt there, a little bit of having not connected him with his past really at all up to this point, and making him feel a little bit of that isolation, even if her intention was just to protect him. And, showing that photo of him as a baby with his human parents and telling him that Tarzan, I just want you to be happy, whatever you decide, because we're at the point now where he's thinking about leaving with Jane. And
Yeah.
I don't know, there's just a real gravitas in what she's delivering there and just the unconditional love and he's telling her that no matter what, even if he does intend to leave with her, that she will always be his mother. And I think Glenn's line delivery when she says, "And you will always be in my heart," it's very tender. It's just so open-hearted. Yes, it's cheesy. No, I don't care. And she realizes like this might be the last time I'm even seeing him ever, because he's probably not going to come back from wherever he's going to,
Hmm.
because she doesn't have any concept of how far away England is. So
Yeah.
like it's really rough, just the pain of realizing kind of like a little bit of an empty nest syndrome here happening.
Yeah. And that could be a connection to, children going off to college or,
Yes.
leaving, and that pain of motherhood, of, her also revisiting where she got him from, where he was crying and feeling all of that all over again. I was always curious why she didn't take the photo when it either falls or she steps on it.
Hmm.
I think that could have been another way to approach this. And again, another
Yeah.
adaptation, maybe another viewpoint, but I think that is a way for him to not question where those people came from, where his family came from. But
Mm.
it's also a necessary point for him to realize maybe that he does have a choice. And I think it makes it easy because this is after the humans have arrived. But
Right.
I'm curious of that happening beforehand, what he would have done. And
Yeah.
the other part of all of this, with Kala backing away, I think if it were just Jane and she was separate, that it would have been a totally different interaction. It's
Right.
it's seeing the men more so, I would say, maybe the gun. Not that they would
Hmm.
know what a gun is, but seeing this group of people and saying that kind of being the fear. And, later on, obviously, we see them decide or differentiate between the good humans and the bad humans. But again, maybe I think having more of Kala and Jane together would have been interesting to see that dynamic.
Yeah, for
Again,
sure.
maybe a sequel, but
Yeah. I mean, all of these are really fascinating dynamics that I think is what makes the first two acts so compelling to me, and why I ultimately think the third act feels a little bit rushed. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it feels a little more formulaic of like how these Disney movies in the 90s kind of are always having these similar dynamics, of the
mhm.
confrontation and of course the villain falling off a cliff, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, what I thought was, I think what I was most shocked by in this is when they show the shadow of the lightning and Clayton hanging from the vine. I was like, oh
Yeah.
boy, they really went there.
Bleak.
Yeah, very, very. Again, as a kid, I don't think you understand what that is, but even the act of Tarzan wanting to save him as he falls is really interesting too.
I mean, I think the whole thing with like where it starts with Clayton sort of tricking them as he and his little poacher minions go off and capture all the gorillas,
Hmm.
Tarzan going back and stripping off his human clothes and like going to save them alongside Jane. Like, I think there are moments here that could have benefited from a little more, I don't know, just breathing room
Hmm.
that let us feel like the emotional impact of Clayton betraying them, and then when Clayton is wounding Kerchak, and how quickly that happens before they move on to the next scene, and then Tarzan and Clayton fighting in the rain among this all the vines. Like,
Hmm.
it's just so fast the way
Yeah.
this all is like going like a freight train, and then Clayton wild swinging through the vines and ending in him hanging himself, like you said. Like,
Yeah.
first of all, that's something that Disney would certainly not do today. Like, that's another thing. But it just feels to me like the film is at its most confident and original, I suppose, in those first few, like that
Hmm.
first hour, I guess, where we're just kind of hanging out in the jungle with these characters. It's a little bit slower, I guess maybe that's what it is. It just feels more natural, like
Hmm.
to this environment, that things move a little slower, and not in a bad way. Like, you kind of want to be and like luxuriate in this world a little bit. And then I feel like the stuff with Clayton and the gorillas is very like standard Disney third
Yeah.
act. Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Pocahontas, Hunchback all have very similar types of endings, I would
Hmm.
say.
I mean, yeah, it's, I think, us wanting nuance, but also there being maybe runtime limitations and a little bit
Yeah.
of the formulaic part of it that I think we've grown so accustomed to and unfond of with having more action and making the good versus evil ending very easy, especially for kids to understand. I think maybe that's why. And even there are even little scenes that I would have liked more of, when the father and Jane they first find the gorilla nests and they're so excited. It's like I
Hmm.
want to see more of that expedition and them finding
Yeah.
things. We have a montage later in the film of when they're teaching Tarzan, what it is to be human and what space is and all of that. And I think that's another way for them to kind of speed through certain things and to get to the finale. But I do agree to a point that it feels rushed or like a different movie in itself, and that here come the heroics and the action, the violence, but in essence, it's showing us the central themes of the movie in just a very different way of, the friends coming to save Tarzan and Tarzan saving the family and coming back despite Kerchak being so surprised by that. It feels a little bit easy, but I think it's entertaining also. I don't think it throws me off enough to be like, oh, now I dislike this movie. Again, I think it's
Right. For
easy,
sure.
fairly crowd pleasing, a way
Yeah.
to show this ending and get to, I think, what they're trying to show. I think if it were
Hmm.
allowed more time, we could have something that doesn't feel so tonally off or a little bit maybe like Whiplash in the end, but
Yeah.
I think this is around 90-ish minutes. But,
Hmm.
if we
Yeah.
were to have hit the 2 hour mark, I think that's not something Disney was going to ever let happen either.
Right. Not at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even like 10 or 15 more minutes, I think just would have really helped this third act really hit hard even more for me.
Hmm.
But we do get some nice closure with Kerchak and how he names Tarzan like, "You are my son" at last, which
Hmm.
is nice. I wish Kala got a little more to do to like sit with like the grief of her losing her mate. It's again, it's not her story, but
Yeah.
to me, she's a very important character, and we only really linger on her for a little bit before moving on. But yeah, Tarzan, of course, resolving to stay in the jungle, and Jane goes off in her ship. She just decides, nope, this doesn't feel right. She wants to stay with Tarzan and become like a jungle woman alongside him. And so, yes, it is a very nice, like romantic, it's like a romantic comedy ending, really.
Yeah.
That moment that feels good in the moment. I do wish there was a slightly more build up there to make that decision feel right for her. Like, is this kind of a rash decision she's making, spurred of the moment of like, is reality going to set in after a few days in the jungle and you haven't brushed your teeth in a week and you haven't really eaten anything of substance? Like, I don't know. I'm picturing like the Graduate kind of ending of being like, oh shit, now I'm just living
Yeah.
in the jungle. Like,
Yeah.
what do I do now?
Really. Literally jumping off of a rowboat to
Hmm.
go be with the love of your life that you've known for maybe a couple days or
Yeah.
maybe weeks. I don't know. Maybe the timeline is a little off, but also when with the conversation that Tarzan's like, okay, yes, we go and then we come back tomorrow. And she's like, no, this is kind
Yeah.
of like one and done. Her saying goodbye to her dad in that boat is also so sad. Like she
Hmm.
may never see him again. I feel like that moment is also like oh my God, holy crap. Are you sure you want to do this kind of thing? But then he does show up in the credits. So I'm like, wait, did he not go back? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I guess he chased after her because, at least one family unit is united. We don't have to break up every family.
Right.
So
Right.
there you have it. Yes, so that's Tarzan. Do you have any stray observations we didn't get to?
I don't think so. We hit all of the best moments. I mean, even like
Oh.
surfing through the trees. I think a lot of the animation is just so strong and a reason to revisit this movie, let alone certain actors and voices. Have you seen the any of the sequels, the Disney sequels?
I have not. Although I do hear that Glenn does return for Tarzan
She
too.
does,
So,
or so I
yeah.
saw. I don't know
Yeah.
what her role is like, but yeah,
Yeah,
you'll have to watch soon.
I suppose. But Yeah, I think Glenn is putting in a really good, very selfless performance, I would say. It's just one of those things where she is not going to really be the focus
Yeah.
outside of her one verse of You'll Be in My Heart, I guess, and a
Yeah.
few emotional scenes. But is really just serving the story well. This isn't going to be like her grand diva kind of role of like a
Hmm.
Cruella de Vil or any of her great 80s and 90s work, but it clearly meant a lot to her to make this movie, especially for her daughter at this time where Annie would certainly appreciate it, of course.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just a nice little capper to the 90s for Glenn.
Yeah, I agree. It's,
Yeah.
it's not something maybe many people look to, but I don't think it's a bad role at all. It's just a really small one. And she
Yeah.
made it as much of her own as she could.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the release of Tarzan. So it premiered on June 12th, 1999 at the El Capitan Theater, and then entered wide release on June 18th, premiering at number one at the box office that weekend, of course. But worth noting, it just barely beat Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me in its second weekend, by the way. So,
Wow.
holding
That
strong,
really
Austin
shows.
Powers.
Yeah.
Yes. Just a little snapshot of that weekend, too, if you want that. We also had that weekend The General's Daughter, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Notting Hill, Instinct, The Mummy, Entrapment, The Matrix, and Tea with Mussolini. So,
Wow.
once again, as we've talked about quite a bit with these 90s box office segments, a little something for everyone, Take me back. What a time for culture.
Very true. But I think, it just goes to show how well Tarzan did. It
Yeah,
it
for sure.
blew its not only its budget away, but also audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ultimately made $171 million at the US box office, making it the number 6 movie of the year. Fun fact, just to tie it all back in, that the Austin Powers movie did, in fact, outgross it in the end by about $30 million. But yes, number 6 in that great year of 1999 is really worth saying something, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, with critics, it was very well received, mostly positive, though there was some pushback about the Phil Collins of it all and the fact that it wasn't quite like those top tier animated films from earlier in the decade. And with awards, most of its recognition was for You'll Be in My Heart, which won at the Golden Globes and at the Oscars. Here's a fun fact for you. This is the first movie starring Glenn to win an Oscar since Reversal of Fortune in 1990. And it's also, all these years later, the most recent film featuring Glenn to win an Oscar,
Wow.
which
See,
is kind of tragic,
that's
but
crazy. I mean, I know go along with her 8
yeah.
lost nominations, but yeah. Oof.
But yeah, I'll say this. I think the warmth and the gentleness of her vocal in that film is what helped to sell You'll Be in My Heart as the winner. Or at least that's what I tell myself to sleep
Yeah.
at night. So, yes. Anyway, just any general thoughts on why you think Tarzan had this mostly positive reception, but still not quite getting to that upper level? Like, do you think there's a reason it maybe doesn't quite go all the way in that way?
Maybe part of it is because Tarzan was IP and that it has
That's
other
true.
adaptations and maybe memories for audiences. I
Mm,
don't think that's a reason to not make it, one of the great Renaissance Disney films, but I would say most of those feel original. Like, yes, you have the
yeah.
Hamlet of The Lion King and whatnot, but all of that is just so different that maybe Tarzan for people feels a little derivative.
Yeah. More
Um,
familiar. Yeah. True.
yeah, I don't think there's anything like screaming out though. It just, yeah, I
Mm,
mean, after I finished, I was like, this was good, not great. And we move on.
yeah.
It is kind of it's an
It's cute.
interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think Disney had really, like we'd sort of been saying, perfected a formula. The idea of, the hero going on this personal journey and self discovery and the sidekicks and the the earworm songs and the jokes. Like, it was all clicking really well at this time for what
Hmm.
audiences wanted to see. But at the same time, at least with critics, I think there was this growing recognition, I suppose, for what the formula was. Like, I do think to a certain extent it does feel like a B-side of The Lion King or even Pocahontas in the way it is portraying nature and these kind of hero journeys feeling somewhat similar.
Hmm.
But, obviously it still worked. It was definitely still a success. So
Yeah.
this wasn't like a big L by any means. Like, and the voice performances too were a big part of it. Also worth noting, Rosie O'Donnell did win a Kids' Choice Award for her performance. So,
Yeah, I see that happening. This was definitely like a
mhm.
Rosie time, and her
Yes.
appearance in this movie, I think, is what I had always thought about was
Yeah.
Rosie as Turk and having a lot of the comedy with that too.
Mhm. Yep. Huge with kids in the 90s. Yes. Just a random question, since you're obviously part of the Oscar Wilde podcast. We did not have Best Animated Feature in 1999 quite yet. That would be 2 years later. You think this could have maybe won that year? Because it's a really tough year. Because we also had Toy Story 2 and we had The Iron Giant. I think those would have been the other bigger
Mm.
contenders. So,
I think Toy Story 2 wins
yeah.
easily, but I think Tarzan is nominated for sure.
Yeah, I think so. But I also, actually, I think to that point, Toy Story 2 and The Iron Giant would probably be like the populist hit versus the art house ish contender that we
Hmm.
sometimes get with these animated races. Just a thought,
Yeah.
kind of like the Wild Robot and Flow in a way, like I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier.
I mean, I thought about that when I was watching, was like, wait, this wasn't nominated, but then remembering that it only starts a
Yeah.
couple years later.
Well, let's get to our last segment where we're going to rate Glenn's performance on a very specific scale. So, thinking about her performance and where this sits in her career, would you say that with her performance as Kala, she is ready for her close up, which is to say, one of her best performances? Is it low Glenergy, not one of your faves, or close but no cigar, somewhere in the middle?
I would say close but no cigar, somewhere in the middle. It's again not a bad performance. It's just not one that it's not the star of the show, but it's
Sure.
meant to be quiet. I don't think there's any bad Glenn performance either. So, um,
Ever. Ever?
I
I mean, I'm not going to disagree, but it's a
well,
bold claim.
yeah, well, she has fun too. I mean, definitely some of her newer
She
ones,
has fun.
fun to
Yeah.
make fun of.
Yes.
But yeah, I would say close but no cigar. What about you?
Okay. I would say close but no cigar, just by the sheer nature of the fact that she doesn't really get a close up kind of moment,
Yeah.
other than singing that You'll Be in My Heart, I guess, and a few nice scenes. But, very lovely voice work, very sweet, very warm, and exactly what the role requires. Maybe she could have been replaced by other actresses of her generation who kind of could have had a very similar performance. So that's why I don't think it's that distinctive Glenn necessarily.
Hmm.
But yeah, obviously not low Glenergy. I think it's a major step up from Gandahar in the voice department, and actually giving an effort this time, which is nice. But yes, it's lovely work, very underrated.
Have you seen a lot of her like voice work films? Like, do you feel like this is one of her better ones also? I know she doesn't have that
Yeah,
many,
I mean, she
which
doesn't do
kind
that
of
many, but
surprises me
she
too.
does have Hoodwinked later on, where she plays Grandma, and Hoodwinked too.
Yeah.
So we will be getting to those. That will be a double feature down the road. But yes, I actually haven't seen those movies, so that's going to be an
Those will be
experience.
new. Great.
Yes, but I have talked about her with The Simpsons, her voice as Homer Simpson's mother, which she is lovely in. She is mother. She is a great mother figure. That's what I think. That's what I'm discovering through this journey.
Always mother. Yes.
On that note, Nick, thank you so much for joining me. This was so
Of
fun and
course.
so comprehensive, and we went down some wild paths, swinging on various trees, but I think we landed in a good place. So thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I think Tarzan is a movie I will always like happily revisit, and I think
Mm.
this discussion of it too made it so different from any other viewing I've had. So
Wow.
I think whenever you're revisiting Disney movies in general, to think of certain characters or actors and why they chose to be in that movie, I think Glenn here is a perfect example of that, and really brings it back to why she did it. Doing it for her own daughter is makes it really special. I think there's more meaning to it because of that. So thank you for having me
Yeah.
on, especially for this
Mhm.
movie, and I can't wait to hear about all the other Glenn performances to come.
Yes, very excited. And we're now heading into the 21st century. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but, we'll certainly have some fun. But anyway, Nick, thank you so much. And where can people find more of you on the internet?
They can find, so you mentioned my podcast, Oscar Wilde, that you can find on all socials at Oscar Wilde Pod. And my content, either I will repost on Twitter at sauerkraut27, some of my writings with Awards Watch, and we have other links listed there for websites and whatnot. So yeah, excited,
Yeah.
especially heading into this award season.
It's an essential time to start listening to Oscar Wilde if you haven't already. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for listening. You could find me at Kevin_Jacobsen on Twitter and Instagram. Just Kevin Jacobsen, no underscore on Blue Sky. You can also listen to my Oscar themed podcast and The Runner Up Is for coverage of every single Best Actress race, including one of the definitive ones with Nick here, 2009, talking Sandra Bullock and Gabourey Sidibe and all kinds of good stuff. That question and answer
Other
segment
mothers.
will just be rent-free in my head forever. Yes, other mothers indeed. And The Runner Up Is on all platforms. And to keep up with the world according to Glenn on social, go to The Glenn Pod and rate, review, and follow on all podcast platforms. And with that, I'll bid you all adieu.